Alright. Welcome back if you're returning, and if you've never been here before, thank you for joining me. This is Talking to Myself Gaming. I am talking to myself. And if you don't know this about me already, I'm going to be trying a lot of new things as I figure out what works for me and what works for you guys. You guys in the future, that is. So, today I want to talk to myself about a particular topic I don't think is actually true. And so, while I try to figure out what I'm thinking about, I'm going to play Ys Origins. So let's get that started, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I want to talk about and why. And I'm actually gonna do as much skipping as I possibly can. And I meant to have my music on. I don't know why it didn't turn on, so give me a second here. Okay, so I have been listening to a great lectures course. I've also cut my tongue, so we'll see how this is gonna go. I can already hear that I'm gonna be dragging my tongue. But I've been listening to this great lectures course. Great courses lecture is actually what I've been listening to. And I guess I don't even know what it's about well enough to say what it's about. So ignore all this on the screen for a while, and I'll just tell you what the title of the course is, and that's what it's about. So it's called The Quest for Meaning, Values, Ethics, and the Modern Experience. And it's hard to say what it's about because it is about those things, but I'm on lecture 13, and I believe that they're all either half-hour, maybe 45-minute lectures. I don't think any of them is as long as an hour, and that's kind of the point of the service. Come on. Skip. I'm on episode 13, lecture 13, and at the end of lecture 12, the president of Audible at the time actually thanked me for having listened to the whole thing. Like, that was all that was packaged in the original. But of course, even in the course, it had to have been 2 parts. Even in the course, he says after 12 that he has 12 more to do. But through 12, so 12 times half an hour is 6 hours of lectures, all he does is say... How do I want to say this? All he does is negatively identify the quest for all of these things. And really what he does is negatively identify, or at least negatively define, the way these things have played out in our civilization, that is our world civilization, since what he calls, and rightly so, the axial age. One second. Okay, so hack and slash. Anyway, I wanted to play this game because it's a hack and slash game. And he negatively defines or negatively attributes these different things, the quest for ethics and meaning and value, and how up until even the 1970s, we hadn't arrived at a satisfactory definition, or at least we hadn't broadened the definitions of these things satisfactorily since Aristotle, is the point that he's trying to make, that even people like Hume were, while on target, still missing the mark. And this lecture series, it should not go without noting, was recorded in 2000, the year 2000, and he makes that point. And I am on episode 13 or lecture 13 or lecture 14. I'm not entirely sure, and it's not entirely important. Just like the narrative of what's going on in this game for your purposes. I'm climbing a tower and purifying it because this is an SNES hack and slash adventure game. But one second. No. He's going through and he's showing how we don't have a working ethic. And he's recording in 2000. And I took seriously the idea that I wanted to do philosophy, if not study it. I took that idea very seriously about 5 years ago. And in a lot of ways, if what I'm doing with these podcasts, this channel, is I'm kind of maybe trying to demonstrate that doing philosophy isn't as difficult as we act like it is, but it is more time consuming and it does require more depth of thought and feeling than what you find in people who are summarizing for you philosophy. And so, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but I got interested in trying to learn about philosophy. Maybe it was called... No, yeah, I do remember the name of the podcast, and as far as I know, he's still going. I lost interest once he started to monetize, but that actually didn't have anything to do with his monetization. It had everything to do with my life became too hectic and chaotic, and he stopped uploading for a long time for same reasons. So when he came back as monetized, I had already moved on. Which is something that I have to remember about this very channel, that even when I'm feeling sad and I don't want to work through the sadness or whatever other emotion I don't want to work through, in a very real but also in a very metaphorical way. I don't want to work through it in the sense that I don't want to do work through feeling the emotion, and I also don't want to just, in a metaphorical sense, work through the emotion. And so what I'm doing now is I've been listening to this lecture, and I've had these thoughts that I know are pre-verbal and subconscious on my mind. But I also want to play a mindless video game and not really think about what I'm doing or pay attention to the narrative of the game. I just kind of want to smash X or Y a whole bunch. And if I do that while I'm talking to myself, that's technically working through what I'm feeling, even if what I'm feeling I don't really know what I'm feeling. And so concurrent to this lecture series about meaning and ethic and morality, in addition to that, I just finished 13 Sentinels. I haven't gone back and replayed any of the story, and I haven't done the day 4 or whatever, sector 4 of extra missions after you 100% the game, but I got the first ending and the extended epilogue, so if there's more to be gotten, I'll probably get around to getting it. If I had friends that had also played the game, they would tell me if it was there, and then I would be motivated, and I haven't wanted to accidentally spoil myself on what it is, if it's there, and I need to make a whole episode about that game, but I didn't record any of my play because I was doing that for myself, because it's a deeply narrative game, and I'm not sure how... I'm not going to make it. I'm not sure how well that's going to translate to a Let's Play, that particular game. And I don't know that I want to do short form review. I was thinking that maybe what I wanted to do is long form review. There's a guy that I follow, and I'm sure that others of you follow him. If you like my work, you like long form video game Let's Plays, who does a series of was blank title as good as I remember, and so he does like 4 to 6 hour episodes where he plays the game and tells you what he did and how he felt about it after, and I was thinking maybe what I would do is I would just record myself playing this or something else and then talk over it, but this is a tricky little... I don't know how to double jump, and that doesn't make me jump further. I know I'm off topic. Give me a second. I'll get back to it. Always dash once able. Double tap to dash. How else can I dash without it? Hold attack to use skills. Those all seem like the kind of things I'd have opinions about. I don't know how to long jump. Oh, is it because I'm holding it? Am I accidentally holding it? Yeah, I'm holding it is what it is. And so 13 Sentinels. 13 Sentinels is a game that really deserves a lot of time and thought behind what I have to say about it, and it really deserves fuck me. I'll get this. It really deserves, how do I want to put this? It deserves that you, the audience, have either played it or have seen it played, rather than just discussed, because it's not even the playing, it's the voice acting is so good in it. And I guess I'm doing a review for it now, and I don't want to do that, but it's a really good game, and it's got me thinking, and a lot of the themes of that game are the themes of this lecture that I'm listening to, or the series of lectures that I'm listening to on ethics and morality and etc. And so really what I'm saying is that I don't know what I want to do with the fact that I played it and really liked it, and I do want to do a review of it, but I also want to do a long-form discussion of it, because it's very excellent and it deserves it. It definitely deserves it. But what I'm doing, if I'm doing anything, and this might be a nightmare for you, and it might be a nightmare for me, and I don't know if we'll revisit this game and we'll play it all the way together or not, and I don't know that matters, or I'm interested in answering or exploring that question right now, because I still need to get back to Rhapsody, and I just engaged myself in a real way to Assassin's Creed 2. But what I'm thinking about is how, when I was listening to Philosophize This, the podcast that I was listening to, it came to my attention after I had listened to it up until whenever he stopped would have been around Roman philosophy, around the Christian era, the early Christian era. And I listened to, shortly thereafter, I listened to the great courses, Great Minds of the Western Tradition, and then Great Minds of the Eastern. Peculiarly shaped depression on the altar. Is there a way that I use an item? I hope I used that correctly. And after I listened to Philosophize This and the Western tradition, the Great Minds of the Western Tradition, when the lecturer, which is misleading because the Great Minds of the Western Tradition series is actually lots of different lecturers. Excuse me, it's actually a lot of different lecturers. But one particular lecturer says, when I guess he's introducing Plato, But when he's introducing Plato, he says that Western philosophy is all footnotes to Plato. It bothered me hearing that. I didn't like hearing that. And then I thought, no, that can't be right. You know, we have to have developed philosophy since Plato. And Plato can't have said all there is to say on the subject of philosophy. That's just not possible. That's how I reacted. And the subsequent 5 years and all the studying that I've done, the truth that I've encountered is that, yeah, it really is, philosophy really is that shallow. It's not that Plato said all there was to say, it's that no one has said anything more than what Plato had to say. And I would like to say that I don't really understand why, but if I were going to hazard a guess, I think that the reason that philosophy hasn't developed past or beyond Plato is because, well, the tradition of Western philosophy as it was being performed by the Latin tradition in the West died. It didn't die in Byzantium, but Byzantium isn't really the West. Now, modern Greece wants to maintain the identity that they're still the West because they're where the West was delineated. They are who delineated the East-West divide, in fact, the Greeks. But when we're talking about the West, unfortunately, we're talking about a particular part of Europe and North America, and parts of North America, and the parts of North America only very recently, within the last few hundred years. So we're not really talking about the former Iron Curtain countries. We're not really talking about Eastern Europe. We're not really talking about east of Germany, like modern Germany's borders, when we're talking about the West, and when we're talking about Europe. Because, like, I know that the Habsburgs were in Hungary, and I know that the whole thing with post-Byzantium Turkey was like the eastern part of Europe, Transylvania, etc., was all fighting against the Turks in the name of Christianity, and that like Romania and Hungary, and I meant to say Bulgaria, Jesus, and they're technically European, and that they're technically Christian, and so they were technically included in the Christian identity when historians would say Christianity or Christendom. But they're not who they mean. They mean France, Germany, England, and Spain, and to a lesser degree Italy, but Italy's not one thing. So Italy as in like the Vatican, and that again, Italy was only unified as one corporate entity following the collapse of Rome, like with Mussolini basically. And even then the peninsula resists the idea, and for good reason. They already lived that hyper nationalistic shit, 2,000 years ago. I don't see any reason why they would want to pretend at it now, especially watching all these people for the last 2,000 years who aren't them pretend at it. And so what I'm trying to say is that Christianity, I think everybody knows this, but I don't think we really appreciate what it means. Christianity lost contact with the philosophical tradition in the West for several hundred years, and when they got it back, this is what I'm trying to indicate, is I think that when the philosophical tradition came back to the West, it came back as a niche interest among nerds like me. And so the reason that it hasn't developed beyond Plato, that the reason that philosophy the philosophy in the West is just footnotes to Plato, isn't that Plato got everything right. Plato didn't get everything right. If you read Plato's Corpus, Plato got nearly everything wrong because Plato is being ironic, because Plato is saying, like his teacher, that he doesn't really know anything, and because he was first and foremost a playwright, he was just making plays. He was writing novels in the sense that we are today, just exploring the conversations with the people that he knew and the people that he imagined having known, right? In the same way that the idiots on YouTube that get these AI programs that pretend to be Aristotle and Nietzsche and have them argue. It's like neither of them is anywhere close to being Aristotle or Nietzsche, in the same way that Plato's dialogues are in no way like Aristotle or any of the people that exist in them, in the same way that Xenophon's recreation or representation of Aristotle is nothing like Aristotle. Now, it's probably something like him in that it's how people perceived him, specifically Xenophon and the people that would agree with Xenophon. Like I say, people only make money when they say things that people already want to hear, right? So Xenophon's built-in audience of people who didn't like Aristotle thought Aristotle was the way he was, but the way that people think we are is not the way that we are, and the way that I can guarantee that the way you think I am is not the way I am. And the way that I think you are is probably not actually the way you are. It's just the way that I've been able to piece you together. But see, people don't like it when you piece them together and you're accurate. They'll call you a pseudopsychologist, or they'll call you other hateful names. Give me a second. My equipment is being weird. There we go. My equipment's not being weird anymore. And so what am I thinking about? What's the point? Well, Plato was being ironic, and we've just been doing footnotes, and the reason it's all footnotes is because these people had a niche interest in philosophy, and philosophy means ancient writings when you're talking from the perspective of somebody in the 10th, 11th, and beyond, up until recently, when you could be like, what's his name? Oh, he talked about him so much. I almost said George Bernard Shaw, but I can't remember his name. It's there. I feel like there's a Bernhard or a Bernard or Burns. I don't know. There's a British philosopher of last century who was really popular and famous. And my point is that you can actually make money now being a professional philosopher again. In order to do that in the pre-modern age, you had to sell books, right? Like, you still have to sell books, but you can also get on television, and you can get on the radio, and you can get on YouTube, and you can have a podcast, and you understand how media works today better than I do. I am certain of that. But what am I saying? I'm saying that the reason that philosophy is, in fact, just footnotes to Plato is because these people, until the modern era, until I don't even know when to date it, honestly, probably like when you get around Hume and Locke. So maybe by the time of the late Renaissance, when you start to get into humanism as a movement, right, where you can have Christianity v. humanism, is probably when when you could be a professional philosopher. Because in order to be a professional who had an interest in philosophy in the world, before that, you also had to have a day job. Like that, like selling those books was not your sole source of income. And if you were a good enough writer, or you were a good enough capitalist, in the pre-modern world, they would kill you, is what would happen. To be honest, they'd just try you of heresy and murder you. Eventually, I mean, they would exile you first after sending you a cease and desist letter, and then they would whip and torture you through the Inquisition, and then they would exile you again, and then they would burn you at the stake. I mean, in order to die at the stake as a witch or as a heretic in the during the witch trials, you had to really fuck up. Like, you had to really try. Is something that we don't like to talk about and we don't like to acknowledge. And so what does that have to do with morals and ethics? Well, it has everything really to do with morals and ethics, because what we don't understand and what we pretend like isn't true is that the medieval world was actually deeply philosophical. What was happening is that they weren't being philosophical, as in they weren't doing philosophia. They weren't doing the love of wisdom. And I guess part of what I'm thinking is that I don't know that I loved the way the lecturer defined wisdom, because I think that he conflates wisdom and tradition, and wisdom and tradition aren't the same thing. I think that he gave a very bad, in fact, I think he gave an entirely wrong definition of wisdom. He tried to conflate wisdom and tradition, where he said that wisdom is what we've learned to do because it's what has worked in the past. But that's tradition. Wisdom is not that. The reason that the philosophers that they could have a name for themselves, the philosophia, the lovers of wisdom, the reason that they could have a name for themselves is because it's a different thing than tradition. They would have called themselves the lovers of tradition, because I'm sure that they had a different word for tradition. Tradition is what you do because it's worked in the past. Wisdom, where they're different, is wisdom is what you've learned not because it's worked in the past, but through observations made over time. Wisdom is what happens when you examine your memories. Wisdom is what happens when you deeply examine your history, not just your folklore, but your history. And so I think that he wanted to conflate wisdom and tradition because he wants to say that, and I don't know that this is true, but I think that where he's building in lectures 13 to 24, I think that he wants to say that wisdom and religion are the same thing. And he's wrong, because religion isn't self-examination of our history and our folklore. Religion is not self-critical. Once a tradition, or once a wisdom tradition becomes a faith tradition, becomes a religion, it becomes impossible for that religion to also be wise. That religion is only tradition now. Dogma and wisdom are the opposites. That's why they're different names. You wouldn't say the dogma of the church, you would say the wisdom of the church. I don't believe, well, because wisdom isn't a set code of beliefs to get you to the correct answer, and the correct answer is the kingdom of heaven. Wisdom is in effect the negative attribution of the correct answer, and so that's where what he was doing when he was using wisdom. He hasn't used the term wisdom since he introduced it, but what he was trying to say is that wisdom is sort of like this collective, unknowable set of answers for how we should behave. And so he wants to give this idea that philosophy is the quest for the good life. But that's not true. That's not what philosophia is. Philosophia, wisdom is self-critical self-reflection. and it's self-critical self-reflection about everything. And so when I say that wisdom is looking critically at your own history, that's what I'm talking about. It's self-critical self-reflection about your history, and your history can mean your history as an individual, it can mean your history as a nation or as a people, but it can also mean your history about the history of the human species. And so what I'm doing and what I'm calling philosophy is I am looking at what's the best good. Like I'm looking self-critically at the history of the human species, and so that means that I have to look self-critically at the wisdom and at the tradition which dogmatizes it, if you understand. So the reason, for instance, and he talks a little bit about this, but then he gets wildly disinterested in Eastern philosophy in a major way after about the second episode. He only uses Eastern or non-Christian or non-anti-Christian, because atheism isn't atheism; it's just anti-Christianity, and that's not atheism. And that's not a worldview. It's just a rejection of what you think Christianity is, and really it's just an ignorance. It's just a broad and bold ignorance. To declare that there is no God is just a broad and bold ignorance, and to declare that there's no theological or theistic approach to union with God is just stupidity. It's just ignorance. And ignorance is making a self-harming or a harmful choice. It doesn't necessarily have to be harmful to you. A stupid choice can very much leave you alive and unharmed, but hurt and kill millions or billions. Which 13 Sentinels actually explores. And so Platonic dialectic philosophy, in a lot of ways, what I'm doing in a lot of ways is it's an exploration. It's not what people don't understand is that, like, philosophy and science, they're not different approaches to the same thing. And so I once heard Dr. Stephen Novella tell Maximo Pigliucci that you don't need to understand philosophy, and you don't need to have an interest in ethics in order to be a good scientist. And that's just the speak of a stupid person, because without ethic, without morality, without a firm understanding of good, bad, right, wrong, you're a Chinese scientist and you just make up your data so you can publish. And I'm not being racist. You can type it in right now on your phone, Chinese science fake, and you'll see that there is a huge scandal going on right now in the peer-reviewed publishing among scientists, that Chinese authors, Chinese publishers, or that publications are publishing Chinese science without thoroughly fact-checking it, because they're willing to pay. And so right now journals are pay to publish. You pay the publisher and they'll publish your article. And so that's the opposite of peer review. But that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about philosophy being footnotes to Plato. Is it's like you're paying a publisher to publish your footnotes to Plato is literally what you're doing, because you have a niche interest in the pre-modern world. You would have had a niche interest in philosophy, and so what you're trying to do is you're trying to be Neil deGrasse Tyson. You're trying to be a philosophy. What do they call it? When you promote something, a communicator. Do they call it a science communicator? Right? Don't they call Neil deGrasse Tyson a science communicator? You're being a philosophy communicator. You're just commuting the ideas, communicating the ideas, commuting also. You're communicating the ideas. You're not really building on them. You're just telling the world how they apply to you. And that's actually what I've been thinking about since this lecture is what what I wanted to do to follow up my last episode is I was thinking that what I would do is I would watch people doing science communication. That can't be right. Maybe it's popularizer. Science popularization, where they take what people think is a complex or a high-level idea, like the idea of quantum entanglement, and then explain it in 9 minutes without really leaving you any understanding. And so quite literally what they're doing is they're making videos telling people who already know about quantum physics what they already want to hear, which is that they're smart enough to know about quantum physics. And so the presenter, what they're doing is they're vindicating the audience for already knowing by acting like they can't understand what's going on. And the reason they're acting like they can't understand what's going on is so if they make any mistakes, they can say, oh, well, I was just making a video for YouTube, which is, in fact, the opposite of what I'm doing. I've made a lot of mistakes on here, and if you call me out on them, I'll mea culpa, and I'll ask for the truth, and we'll seek that out. So I don't call myself a philosopher. In fact, I call myself philaletheia, which means a lover of truth. Really, it means a friend of truth. Phil doesn't mean love. Phila means friend. It means a particular kind of friendship. It means the kind of friendship that Aristotle meant when he was explaining what a friend is. And when he said that a friend is a second self, not a friend is like a second self, but a friend is a second self. And I've been thinking a lot about friendship because I said some very bold things in the last 15 minutes, maybe the last 30 minutes of my last episode of the actual podcast of this, and about friendship. And I've noticed a very, very severe and very real dearth of the things that I said are friendship in my life. And when Aristotle says that when you love your friend the way you love yourself, that when your friend does well, you do well, even if you didn't do anything. Like that's what Jesus is talking about when he says love your neighbor as yourself. He's saying be friendly, be a friend, because the people that would have heard that would have already had hundreds of years. We forget in a major way, or we pretend like it isn't true, or we pretend like we don't know that the Jewish diaspora outside of the rural parts of what had once been Israel, but what were by the time of Jesus's ministry, and definitely by the time of the publication of the Gospel of Luke, what were Palestine and would remain Palestine. Only in the very, very far rural parts of Palestine did anybody, or was anybody not thoroughly Grecified. I don't know how I want to say that, but the Alexandrian Greeks that wrote the Gospels, who would have read the Gospels, when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, they know he's referencing Aristotle, which means that either Jesus actually referenced Aristotle, which would be mind-blowing, and that's why the Gospel Q would absolutely need to not be replicated and not make it to history. Because if Jesus is out here referencing Greek philosophy, then how is he a good first century Jew? And the answer is he's a great first century Jew if he's quoting philosophy. It's only a problem for you if you're a 12th century Catholic and you think that pagan philosophy and Jesus's message are they're not compatible. What's that? What is it? Incompatible? Is that the word? That's right. That Jesus and Western and Greco-Roman philosophy are incompatible, but you only think that Jesus and Western philosophy, Greco-Roman philosophy, are incompatible if you existed around Justinian, Emperor Justinian, the Justinian that tried the last persecution of the Christians and tried to bring pagan philosophy back. That was a political maneuver, not an intellectual maneuver. And so what I mean by that is like American Democrats, the American left, embracing Marx as hard as they have the last 20 years. That has nothing to do, that's not an intellectual position. It's not a defensive intellectual position. Marx was proved wrong. As this lecturer said in the year 2000, he said in the year 2000, he said, this is a hard thing to say, that Marx was proved wrong in 1989, I believe, when the Berlin Wall was torn down. So I was 2 years old. And so I was born into a world where there was an ideology and a philosophy that was being tested, and we saw it fail. We all watched it fail. And so these millennials and these post-millennials that want to pretend like Marxism didn't fail because it failed in Germany and it didn't fail in the United States because it was never tried in the United States because Marxists were assassins and kept getting themselves thrown in prison. They weren't just assassins, they were terrorists and kept getting themselves thrown in prisons or just assassinated outright. Is a lie. That's what a lie. That's called a lie. That's what a lie looks like. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've thought since 1989, or at least since 1992, when I was a kindergarten and we reenacted the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we reenacted electing Mr. Clinton president. I remember being told that there are ideas, and some ideas are bad, and some ideas are defeated on the battlefield, on the literal battlefields of the world, but also on the intellectual battlefields of the publication houses. And so I was raised to believe that there are ideas that are true, that are ideas that are false, and there are ideas that are anti-true, and that there is in fact a right or a wrong. So that's why I don't call myself a philosopher. I'm not a philosopher. A friend or a lover of wisdom must assume that that wisdom is right because they're a friend. And when you're a friend of something, right? Follow me out. When you're a philo of something, or when you have philos for something, it's your second self. You love it like a second self. And so you pursue its goals like they're your goals. What does that sound like if not first century Judaism and Christianity? Being a lover of God, being a friend of Jesus, being a lover of God. And you got to remember, the earliest called themselves friends and lovers of Jesus. That's what to be a Christian is to be a lover of Christ, right? This is not language I'm making up. This is not even metaphorical language that I'm using for my purposes. If you've ever encountered Christianity, this is the language that is used in the dogma, in the canon. This is the correct language to use when referring to these sacred things. And the reason it's the correct verbiage is because it's the cromulent verbiage. Because Jesus and his followers, if not Jesus his actual self, if Jesus wasn't referencing Aristotle, and frankly I would think that that's mind-blowingly interesting if we were able to prove. And I think that as far as I'm concerned, all of the literary criticism that I've heard, even Bart Ehrman, has no interest in proving that Jesus was educated in Greek philosophy, but his gospel writers and his theologers most certainly were interested in Greek philosophy, because the only way that you could do theology in the first 4 centuries, in fact up until the 12th century, but the only way that you could do philosophy was to do theology, because once you've read Plato, and then again, once you're in the 1st century and Neoplatonism is becoming a thing, so now you've read, this game is not easy to progress when I don't actually read what the fuck I'm supposed to be doing, is it? Once you've read Plotinus, and I have, not all of his work, but I've read all of Plato, and I've read the first. If you split Plotinus into 3 parts into a trilogy, I've read the first trilogy, so that might be books 1 through 3. I don't remember how many books are in the Enneads. It would make sense if the word 9 means 9, wouldn't it? That there are 9 books, so I've read the first 3 books. I've most certainly read and paid attention to closely his book on beauty, if that's not obvious in my language when I speak about beauty on this podcast. But what I'm bothered by, to say it again, is that philosophy really is just footnotes to Plato. It really is just justifications for how right Plato was in reality. And that's bothersome to me, because we read people like John Locke and Hume, and I don't know all their names, Adams, and these 18th, especially in the United States, man, you cannot have a political argument in this country if you haven't read Locke and Adams. You just can't, because if you're educated and you know what you're talking about, if you're speaking to a person who's educated and knows what they're talking about, they're going to reference Locke or Adams, and probably Hume. And if you haven't encountered that before, you're just 400 years behind the conversation. And that's just a fact. And so I have all their work queued up in my Audible for when I'm done reading this lecture series. But what I wanted to sit down here and what I wanted to tell you about, what I want to talk about, what's on my mind, and what's eating at the back of my brain about all this, that philosophy hasn't developed. It's made no attempt to develop. It's not grown or changed at all. We're still justifying, and we're still proving in a lot of ways that Aristotle was right, even though Aristotle couldn't have been right by any stretch of the imagination when he's being ironic and he's saying outright that he and his, specifically the main character of his work, because you have to take the words that the characters say, even if they're being ironic, even if their intention is ironic, at face value. You have to, or you're a bad reader, especially at the time. Because allegory had only just been invented, if you understand, as an idea that a wide audience could be expected to encounter and understand in a meaningful way. It's not till, what, the 400s or 500s? What's his name? Pliny? Is it Pliny that invented interpreting Aesop's fables allegorically? Like, they had to invent the allegorical interpretation of fiction, of not even just fiction, of story. You have to invent that, because wisdom is an elder who knows the correct interpretation. We talk about this a lot when we talk about druids, and we talk about theme, and we talk about staying on theme and staying on message with the religious or the meaningful story, right? And he even says it that in 2000, this lecturer even says it, that this idea that meaning is some unreachable or unattainable goal is stupid, because meaning just means purpose, and we did that. So what's the purpose of life? Well, evolution very clearly tells us that the goal of life is to live. And so he goes through, and this is what I wanted to do, is I wanted to talk about the subject broadly, and I wanted to pick out of my subconscious memories, because I don't know what I memorized about this lecture until I start talking about it. Because what I learned when I took calculus my senior year of high school, I took university level calculus at Wright State University, and so that's not university level calculus. I took calculus in a university. And what I learned from the way that our instructor, I don't know whether she was a professor, I don't know. I don't really understand the prefixes or whatever, the different nomenclature for instructors at the university level. But I was told that instructor is always correct. So the instructor, the way she did it is, I've told you this story before. She broke us up into groups, and then we did the homework. She broke the homework up into however many. She divided it by the groups, and then in the groups we were supposed to do the homework, and then she would have us explain one, or then she would check our math, and then she would have us explain our math on one of the problems on the board. And what I learned in doing that and explaining how I got the correct answer over and over and over again, and I've said this before, and what I found brilliant about that teaching method was that for every problem, and for not just every problem, but every new mathematical technique that we were learning, there was one person in the group that didn't get it at all, one person that picked it up with mastery the first time, and two people that had two gaps in their understanding that were compatible. And so what we did is we really taught one another calculus. She didn't really teach us calculus. She taught us how to do calculus, and we taught each other how to do calculus. Like, she taught us calculus, and we taught one another how to do it, if that makes sense. And so what I learned from that is what the study groups of my learning group at Wright State University were trying to teach us, and that's that you don't know what you don't know until you listen to somebody talking about a subject that you think you do know. Which is why I said that if you're going to talk politics and you're going to talk the economy, I said that funny, but if you're going to talk politics and you're going to talk economics in the United States and you haven't read Locke, you haven't read Hume, you haven't read, I think his name is Adams, but you haven't read these 17th and 18th century writers that inspired the American and the French and American revolutions. I don't know why that sounds better when you say French and American. Is it because French is only one syllable? Because the American and French revolutions just sounds bad, even though it's the correct chronological order. But anyway, if you haven't read the writers that inspired the writer of your Constitution, if you haven't read the people that set the foundation for the rules with which you play the game, i.e., if you haven't read the Dungeon Master's Handbook, you don't know how to dungeon master. You can't talk about the rule sets of D&D. So, like, if you haven't read the player's handbook, you most certainly can't argue with the rules lawyer, which means that if you haven't read the fucking Constitution, you can't argue with a constitutional lawyer, that was always kind of my point when Obama was president, is everybody wanted to be like, oh, Obama was just a senator, he was just this, he was never a leader on a large scale, and it's like, well, he was a constitutional lawyer, and he was a community leader, and that leads me in an awkward way, because I know I haven't built out my other idea. I had it, and then I told you what I'm doing, and then I didn't build it out. But in 2000, this lecturer, I should know his name, and I should credit him with these thoughts that I'm having, and with having said these things that I'm now broadly quoting. But you have Google. You can search for the title. I already said it. He mentioned a philosophical school that I'd never heard of before in the United States called communitarians. I'd never heard of a communitarian before. And they were people who were politically, ideologically, and philosophically interested in community, obviously, but what they were doomsday prophets of our communities. And so what that means is they were how do I want to say this without patting myself on the back and setting myself up for saying it exactly the wrong way? Because it seems like communitarians, to me, are leaning on the wisdom of the community to solve the immediate problems of the community. But that can't be right, because communitarians, while looking accurately at their community and at the lack of community, this is before 2000, mind you, if you know anything about American history, They were pointing to the death of and the lack of the community, but they weren't pointing critically at what we can learn from community of the past. What they were saying is that community of the past had the right answers because they managed to survive somehow all the way to us, and therefore we should maintain the communities of the past and maintain new communities moving forward with the models of the communities of the past. And so that I could understand when I heard him describing these people why I'd never heard of them, and why that argument was gone by the time I was a thinking adult, which means circa 2006. If you want to say thinking adult is 18, because that's when I entered the labor force, but that's what I mean. But thinking adult really shouldn't even begin as a category until until the body is aged 25. And I say the body is aged 25 because I just played a game about time-traveling teenagers. So, you know, how old is the body when you've time-traveled a whole bunch? That's completely irrelevant to the conversation. But I'd never heard this conversation about communitarianism, and the reason I'd never heard the communitarianism argument, even as late as 2006, the reason it was gone is because that was easily lumped in with Southern Republican, well, really Southern Democrat, but Southern conservatism, which circa 2001 was already being hammered on by the liberals as just and only racist. So, yeah, communitarianism was just racism. But it's interesting that we elected in my lifetime, when was the first election? It was 2008. We elected him twice, 2008 and 2012. We elected a communitarian president who ran on openly communitarian. Now that I know a little bit, I didn't know anything, but now that I know a little bit, he ran on an openly communitarian platform. I mean, si se puede, is it Argentinian? Venezuelan? I believe it's Venezuelan. The Venezuelan politics that Biden and is now stealing from Obama, but the si se pueden of his campaign being stolen from Che Guevara is communitarianism, because communitarianism is a kind of socialism. It's saying that the way that communities were structured during feudalism is the way that they should have been structured, because that's the way that it worked in the past. And so what I'm realizing is that I don't have a beef necessarily with liberalism. I do have a beef with liberalism, but liberalism is a particular kind of philosophical reductionism called relativism. Relativism is the broad circle that makes up the greater yin-yang of the Tao, which is the West. He explains this brilliantly through 13 episodes of his lectures, and the first 12 are setting up the argument for relativism. And the reason I have now taken 58 minutes and 48 seconds when I looked at the clock last to say all of this is because what I want to do is point out that I feel vindicated. It took him 6 hours to get to where it took me 59 minutes. So if you listen to the kind of long-form educational, philosophical, or, in my opinion, philolitheic literature, media, I hate that word, but lectures are not literature. If you listen to the same shit that I do, if you consume the same shit that I do, you would understand that a 2-hour podcast ain't shit. It just ain't shit. Sorry, there was enough visual. Oh, fuck me, Dad. There was enough visually stimulating happening on the screen that I completely proved my point by getting distracted. Okay, so philosophical relativism. Yeah, I just played 13 Sentinels and listened to 6 hours. I played as many of them in a row as I could of the battle or whatever, the combat encounters in that game, all in a row. And during that span, I was listening to this podcast. So I've got the argument for and against. Well, the argument for and the denial of philosophical relativism, very fresh in my mind, and it is underscored by teenagers and giant mech robots killing other giant mechanized robots. And it's confused and confusing, and there are a lot of thoughts all tangled up together because I made myself not have them, right? And so, philosophical relativism, if I could just try to sum from memory without looking up the definition anywhere, is the idea that literally everything is relative to the individual subjective perspective. That good, bad, evil, all of these things, they're relative. They're not just subjective, they're also relative. And what that means, if you play out the argument, and my friend, the person whom I would call friend, who thinks that logic is mathematics, would be interested to know that the two 20th century philosophers from England, whose names I can't remember right now, but who are famous and who do show up on really stupid YouTube channels and shorts very frequently, tried to make a logical system or a mathematical system of logic, that is, mathematical proofs of logical concepts, and what they found is that logic necessarily is paradoxical, and that making a mathematical system of logic is completely impossible, which means that Gottfried Leibniz's attempt to make a philosophical language, a communicative language that's perfect and doesn't lose anything in translation from one mind to another, is also completely impossible. So the only way for me to know not just whether I've been cromulent, but to know whether you have a cromulent thought is for you to tell me back what I've said to you. And so the reason that these videos, to pick up on my thought from last time, the reason these other people who aren't me and that I find so shallow and lackluster, the reason that their videos are so shallow and lackluster is for what I just said. They can't go to any greater depth. I'm actually not doing as badly at this as I thought I would. I really thought that I would spend a lot of time quiet and stumbling over myself. I know that my ideas aren't exactly flowing perfectly, and I am completely lost in my game. I don't remember how to get back to that boss. Or, it wasn't even a boss. I don't know how to get back to... Oh, you know what? Nope. I don't remember how I got there, and so that's distracting enough that my thoughts are wandering, but I can't worship truth as a religious concept, as an ideal in the Platonic sense, that is, as a thing which is of itself and exists and is perfect. I can't believe that about truth. That means that I can't be a friend of truth, and I can't think of truth as a second version of myself if I also believe that everything is relative. And so, like, I tried to pursue the problem of evil with a guy who goes by initials, but he was on Hellier. He's the one on Hellier who only called them rude names and trolled them until he met them in person and realized that he could make money off them and wanted to be on their show. I don't like him. After my engagement with him, I don't like him. But I tried to I tried to talk out whether good and evil are relative as concepts with him, and he had no interest in the idea of relativity or anti-relativity, whatever the opposite of relativity is. And see, I guess what we can do, because what everybody wants to do, and why I think Massimo Pigliucci is shallow, and the reason I think that Mr. Novella, Dr. Novella, was so happy to tell him that you don't need to have any interest in ethics or philosophy in order to be a practicing scientician, is because the only thing Massimo Pigliucci ever talks about is the fucking trolley problem. Like, the trolley problem is some great conundrum in philosophy, but like, all the trolley problem does is throw a wrench in relativism. But if that breaks philosophy for you, like if the harm done being relative in the trolley problem, which we're not going to play out the trolley problem. If you don't know what it is, you have access to Google and a pause button. Figure it out for your damn self. If that breaks your mind, you're not a philosopher, and you're not an ethicist. You're just a damn stupid person. And I'm not convinced that Massimo Pigliucci is not a damn stupid person, and that's why, you know, Dr. Steven Novella, not a stupid person, is, well, he is also a stupid person, but the kind of person who would think he's not a stupid person would easily dismiss as a stupid person. Like, it's circular and feeds itself. And I haven't really said anything about anything, because this one I wanted to just see where my thoughts went. And my thoughts are that things can't be relative. Good and evil can't be relative. So that gets me back to a thought experiment that I've had many times, in which I've brought you through before. You know, what sort of loving God, if you can call a God loving, and you can't call a God loving, but what sort of, not and understand what it means to love, because to love a child means to watch over and provide for in a passive way. You can't also say to be a loving parent if you're a helicopter parent. Like, you're not loving the child. Love is a particular kind of nurturing. It's a particular kind of union, really. So, like, again, you have to read medieval philosophy, which is theology, and so we have this idea in the modern age that because Christians of the early pre-modern or the late pre-modern period weren't interested in doing philosophy the way the Romans and the Greeks had done it, because they were seeking out proofs of God, and then they got really confused and were trying to do the mathematics of how many angels could fit on the head of a pin, which never actually happened, but they got confused about what was important and what was philosophy and what was theology and what was wanking off. And you would, if you're trying to do this as a profession, and so what you're trying to do, if you're trying to do this as a profession, and as a lot of ways it's what I'm doing, you're trying to prove how well you can nurture your Orphic egg, is in a lot of ways what I'm doing and what they're doing and what they were doing in the Middle Ages. And so I don't think we should throw as much shade on them as we do, because they were interested in ethics and they were interested in right and wrong. And the reason that we kind of look down on them, and that I kind of like have a negative opinion of humanists, is the same reason that I have a negative opinion of of Simone de Beauvoir, when I said in episode 1 or 2 or whichever, I said, sure, she did a lot for women, but she sure as shit didn't do anything for you, individual woman. She made your life more difficult. She increased your stress. The female brain isn't designed to make choices, and it's not designed to make a lot of choices. That's why females have husbands, and that's why they bombard them with choices that the men think are stupid. And that's why I get so upset with my girlfriends for asking me questions and then choosing the opposite, because they just wanted to hear, they just wanted the choice to be made easier for them. Women naturally have choice anxiety because women have to make choices that they don't even know they're making. Like, it's women's responsibility to choose who propagates the human species, for instance. So, like, they're making choices all the time. They're making choices for their children. They're making choices for their men. They're making choices for their families. This is why in the Sea of Stars Let's Play, I harped so much on choice. When do I get to make a choice? What are my character's choices? What it means to be alive and what it means specifically to be a human is to make choices, because what humans do that animals don't do is make informed choices. What we do is we have, well, not just what we do, what we have the capability of doing because of our giant frontal lobes, is we have the capability of being self-critical about our past choices, and we have the possibility of being self-critical about our future choices, in addition to being self-critical about the choices that we're presently making. Like I said, every choice you make, there's a split second where you can make literally any other choice. And so there's a willful ignorance if you aren't aware of and you're not critical of your choices, and there's a stupidity there if you keep yourself ignorant of the poor choices that you're making and you're not critical of the fact that you're making poor choices. Like, I don't have to be sympathetic for you, and I don't have to be kind to you if, for instance, you have an alcohol addiction and you can't keep a job. It's like, well, you know as well as I do that it's the alcohol. Stop the alcohol. Well, which one's more important to you? It's about choices, and it's about evaluation, and it's about measurement, and it's about choice, right? It's about how many times do I want to beat off in a day, right? It's about how many times? How many times do you want to hit that button, that serotonin button? How many times do you want to be disciplined? Like, that's what philosophy used to be. Philosophy when you get this idea of, like, what is the good life? What are the steps to a good life? Like, that question was specifically about what I just said, how to live a disciplined and how to live a life that was beneficial to the maximal number of people. And that's kind of how we re-figured it out by the 18th century, is that, well, like, ethic, philosophy, like anti-relativism is like the maximal good, right? So, like, everything is relative, but you kind of want to make the choice that's, like, maximally beneficial for the maximum number of people. And that I remember being like the political chant of my childhood, right? So, like, in addition to the question, is your life better than it was 4 years ago, the question was also, like, when we're talking about senators and we're talking about policy decisions, the question used to be what would be the maximal good for the maximal number of people? What would be the best good for the most people? And so, like, that was the argument for gay marriage, is it's like, well, by barring a certain class of people from being able to express their love in public, you're not allowing the pursuit of life, liberty, and you're not allowing the maximally good life, the most possible liberty, and the freest pursuit of happiness that you possibly could to the maximal number of people. And so, like, that was the argument behind, allowing women to this, that's what I defined as politeness, because I'd never heard that phrase. I'd heard that phrase before, but I hadn't heard it in 20 fucking years, right? I hadn't heard it since I was in high school. Maybe even before I was in high school. I probably haven't heard it since Bush's election, the first one, W. Because that used to be the liberal marching line. Like, that used to be the party line, was the maximal benefit for the maximal number of people. But that hasn't been the liberal party line in so long I forgot that was even a thing. Because, again, the reason that liberals lose the elections but win the culture wars is because they say things that are true enough. And so while they were out there trumpeting, the maximal good for the maximal number of people, that's why blacks should be allowed to vote. That's why women should be allowed to vote. That's why Mexicans should be allowed to come across the border. Not even Mexicans. That's why illegal immigrants should be allowed to come across the borders freely and be treated like with benefits better than legal immigrants. Because in fact, there are more illegal immigrants than legal immigrants, right? Which wasn't true for a long time, but it is true again, and it keeps being true under the Democrats because they keep making this promise, but what it becomes is saying something that's true-ish. And so the reason that the Republicans reject the maximal good for the maximal number of people as a philosophy and as a talking point is because it's something that we all agree on, and it's been used to lie and manipulate to us for at least 20 years because they stopped doing it. So since 2004, give or take. And before then, it had been used for 100 years, give or take, to give people that really had no business participating in the political circle at all the largest voter blocks in the political arena. So, like, poor people have no business voting. There's a reason that non-representative democracies of the past didn't allow poor people to vote. There's a reason that the representative monarchic or democratic monarchy of England didn't allow their poor to vote, but did allow their poor to have representatives in the government. And the reason is because poor people are stupid. And what I mean by that is not that poor people are unintelligent. Have always been poor, and I'm more intelligent than you are, but poor people are very stupid. You have to be stupid in order to be and remain poor. You have to be. You have to be making constant bad choices for yourself and other people around you in order to remain poor. You have to. You have to be on drugs. You have to be smoking cigarettes, eating too much. You have to be misallocating your funds, or you have to be too skill-less. You have to be too unskilled to draw in enough funds. And so both of those things are stupid. Both of those things are acts of stupidity. Not being able to provide for yourself is the fundamental act of stupidity. That's why throughout history the rich have taken advantage of the poor, is because the poor are too stupid to already be rich. And there's nothing wrong with being stupid, and there's nothing wrong with being poor. What's wrong is value judging those things, is assuming that because a person is poor, they're also a bad person, right? Because you can be a great person and be poor. I've never had any interest in being rich. Never had any interest in being rich. I've known lots of people that have no interest in being rich, that enjoy their alcoholism, that enjoy spending all of their money, at the start of the week or whatever, at the end of the week on the weekend. That's what they call that. So, what does it really mean to be relativistic? And why have we allowed relativism to take over everything? Because, like, our schools are relativistic. It's like I said, we teach our students, we teach our children to come up with creative answers, not the correct answer, because it's all relative in the end, right? Whether they... Am I doing something when I walk across that? Whether they get the right answer or not, it's all relative in the end. They gave a good answer and they showed creativity in getting it. Which skill is more beneficial to them? Oh, I gotta weaken that spell. I see. I'm trying to do something to weaken that spell. Okay. Well, I haven't really been paying attention to what I'm doing. I've been just trying to memorize this map. Well, now I gotta figure out what the heck. Story items. There are 3 different types. Always effective, effective only when equipped, and usable. An image. Okay. So is it not this feather fan? I guess I have to have it equipped in order to use it? Well, I guess I gotta go back there then. Let's try this again. So, the argument in my mind for relativism is the serial killer argument. What sort of loving God would put together a beautiful, loving family, put together 2 loving people, have them bring into the world a child, raise and love that child in a loving way, and then have them removed by a serial killer that they didn't even know? Because that really bothered me as a child. Like, that, answering that question really bothered me. And so I gave the answer that, you know, if we understand God as an author, then the God, if it's in any way like if you can in any way describe any God as loving, it's watching, and the way in which it loves is with compassion, with feeling. And so what I mean by that is, like, it feels your hurt and it feels your sadness, but like he's talking about with the relativistic worldview, and his rejection for the relativistic worldview is like, if the goal of relativism is to respect all humans to the same degree, then being a serial killer means that you've made a choice to put yourself in an unrespectable position, which is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about, like, how long until politeness is just no longer the answer. And so the relativistic answer to the question of how long until politeness, that is compassion, that is being relative and understanding the relativity of individuals that are perhaps behaving incorrectly, the relative answer to how long you allow someone to misbehave becomes relative to the way in which they're misbehaving, right? And so even the politeness of relativism becomes relativistic and becomes in its own way ironically disregardable. So, okay, so... well, it wasn't whatever I just did. Maybe I need a... well, I can't use it. What if I use this? Magic item, humans, oh, this is what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to call back and be like, hey, I need help. And then I read, damn, I didn't actually read what she said. Try again. I figured that this... shit! I figured this would happen at some point. That the game would... wearing the mask allows you to see the unseeable. It's handy for finding things that have been hidden magically. I didn't think it had been stolen, though. Last I checked, it was still in the possession of House Gemma. The mask? What mask? Flabellum. A cerulean flabellum is for... isn't that for hitting? I guess I don't know what flub in this means. Flagellum is for hitting. Well, coming back here didn't do me any good. Maybe I need a... Maybe I can buy a blessing. I can get... I can get a lot, I guess, more powerful. Ooh, that would be cool. Extend drop item effects. Increase boost. I'm trying... I don't even know how many SP I've got. 4K. Okay. So I'm looking for a mask. What's this? Oy. This is why I didn't want to do this while I was talking to myself. I'm an hour and a half in and I'm thinking, well, have I said enough that I can just end it on this and just play some of this game? Or no, neither of those things is the truth. I haven't really said anything at all. I've just kind of wandered around my thoughts like I'm doing in this game, which is what I wanted to do with this episode. So maybe in the next 2 or 3 years someone will click in on this and give me feedback. I really am talking to the future, and in this way I really am talking to myself. The name, I think that the name actually might be so ironically appropriate that it's chasing people away. Like, well, if he's talking to himself, he's not inviting me to listen, but well, I call it that because it's going to sit unlistened to for so long. Okay. So if you're trying, if the truth of good and goodness, that a good thing is definable as a thing which is beneficial to the maximal number of people, then to me that suggests that that thing should also not be detrimental to anyone, or that it be detrimental to the minimal number of people. Because, like, you can imagine a world. You can imagine the socialist wet dream where everyone has the same income, the same spending power, the same opportunity of, the same equality of opportunity, right? Everybody is equal. There's no merit to society, so nobody is smarter than anybody else. Nobody is dumber than anybody else. Nobody is better than anyone else at any particular skill. No one is worse than anyone else at any particular skill. Everyone has the exact same amount of information available to them in their minds and at the level of conversation, at the same level of abstraction. And you can see that while that would benefit the maximal number of people, there would still be people who are harmed by that, because exceptional people of any stripe, whether it be intellect, speed, athleticism in general, whether it be wealth, whether it be the social skills, whether it be economic skills, whether it be cleverness, whatever it be, by making everyone exactly the same, you make it impossible for anyone to be exceptional. And if no one can be exceptional, then there's no point to anything. There's no purpose in anything, because like the purpose in athletics is to be the best individual or the best team, right? So like the NFL as an example, the reason that the NFL is kind of brilliant is that You don't have to have the team with the best roster and the best coaching staff in order to win the big game, the Super Bowl, right? In order to go all the way and do the whole thing and win it all you have to have is the best team that day, right? And that day means over the course of time. And so what makes football to me interesting is I find myself back to wisdom v tradition. Because there are things about coaching or playing a game of sport, of football, that are traditional, like running the ball on first down. And then there are things that are wisdom, and in this case that are analytical, and that's throwing the ball deep on first down. So wisdom, that is self-critical examination of yourself and your history, that is the past, self-examining all of the available information on any subject over time, and then organizing it over time, and then understanding it in order through time. I think I learned that word recently, and I bitched about learning it, and then I tried to memorize it by repeating it to myself about 1,000,000 times, and I can no longer. It's yep, I can't get it. It's not going to come to my mind. Huh. That's so funny. It must have been 12 hours. I repeated that word in my head over and over and over and over and over again. Not because I wanted to be, but because I was trying to make myself not thinking about anything. I was trying to make myself not think about anything, and I was listening to instrumental music. So I just thought the word to the music, and now the word is just gone. It's not confabulate, but it's like that. It's conditary. You know the word if you listen to my last podcast, because I got annoyed by it while I was reading that psychological article, because it means to put things in order, in a series, in a rational series. Man, I really can't remember. Confabulate is not it. There's gotta be. I'm just running in circles now. There's gotta be somewhere that I'm missing. This is actually pretty sweet as action-adventure games go. I bet that I would like the game itself more in itself if I were paying attention to what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. I bet it's not this difficult. But I honestly thought it was going to be a lot more straightforward than this. That's why I thought I could get through with just talking it out. Maybe on my next one, if I don't get likes, comments, subscribes for how East is going, I'll just play a game I know really well. I just wanted to play an action game. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I want there to be something in this room that I unlocked. I had to use a key to get in this room, but there's nothing here. Which means what? Does that mean that... What does it mean? Fuck you, die. Because I've got this equipped. Wait, now when I hit... Fuck. What does this do? I'm experimenting with the buttons to see if there's like something that I've missed, maybe. I don't want to teleport. What does the generating whirlwinds do? Is that... Oh... Fuck. Fuck. Okay. And so now I've got myself all fucked up. What I should do is I should edit this part out. But I find these parts charming when I listen back to it, and I don't want to edit them out. So what's the relativist answer about the serial killer? Well, it wasn't evil for him. So that means that we have to define good and evil, which is something that I've never done. And again, this whole thing could just be a series of me defining words that we all think we know. But you know, good is what it is. It doesn't necessarily mean beneficial, and it doesn't necessarily mean positive, but good means good, right? Good means not bad. But when you're talking in philosophical language and you say that something is a good, or that something is initial caps good, as in capital G good, right? You're making a value statement, and that good is the opposite of evil. And what I mean by the opposite of evil isn't necessarily obvious even to me. So let's talk about what evil is, because I think that you know what evil means, because I think that you might think that evil is like a kind of like a Zoroastrian concept, like evil is itself an idea. Like evil is an entity, maybe like a satanic entity, or maybe evil is like a demon, right? Like a particular kind of feeling or whatever. But that's not evil for our purposes. Our purpose is evil. Evil is like inexcusable, uncondonable, or inexcusable, or unapologizable. Like they're a thing that you can't apologize for. And so what that means is that there aren't relativistic stakes. That means that there are pales of what is and what is not acceptable behavior. And so if you have pales that you can go beyond, that means if you have marker posts beyond which you can go, that means that there is an area where you should go, and there's also an area where you ought to go. And that area is good, which means it's good for you, because the area outside the pale of acceptable behavior isn't necessarily... It's like your mom, if your mom is a good mom and she teaches you to be polite, saying I'm sorry before you apologize, in fact, saying I'm sorry and not apologizing, not explaining why you did the thing that you did, is the good thing to do. Because while the other thing exists within acceptable behavior, a polite person understands, because a polite person has first-hand experience and self-critical evaluation, that is, access to wisdom, to know that being polite is good. It's even better than acceptable. I think that that's what I'm trying to say. Initial caps, lowercase good, or the adjective good is like saying acceptable. That's acceptable. So like when I say, I'm going to move my mic real quick. When I say when good enough is good enough, nothing is good enough. What I mean is when acceptable, when just doing what's acceptable is acceptable, then nothing that we do is acceptable. Because if you only do the bare minimum, you never get anything done. You're never even meeting your own standard of excellence, right? So like if you're only meeting the minimum requirement for your own self-satisfaction, you aren't being exceptional in satisfying your own self. And so in that way, you're actually treating your own self and your own satisfaction, your own desires, your own beliefs, your own religion, you're treating you, the fundamental you who is behind the thinking and the speaking you. You're letting that you down. You're telling it that it's relativistic and that it's not good enough to be more, to do more for, right? So that's what I was talking about when I was being upset that we don't build buildings like we did around the turn of the 20th century in Chicago and New York and etc. I recently read a book about the World's Fair, the Chicago World's Fair, and learning about the building boom of the dawn of the 20th century, whether that be the late 19th or the actual 20th century, was a real revelation to me. And so I got to talking about tolerance. And so I'm still talking and thinking about how, if your tolerances are only good enough to be acceptable, if you only do the bare minimum, you're not being exceptional. If you're not being exceptional, what are you? Right? How can you claim your Dunning-Kruger exceptionality, that you are smart as you think you are, if you're only doing the bare minimum necessary to be as smart as you think you are? And that's why I talk about, ongoing education. That's why I talk about pushing myself through the tedium or the boredom that I start to experience around the hour and then again at the hour and a half mark. It's not that I'm experiencing boredom, it's that I'm experiencing an indecision. And for me, indecisiveness is the same emotion as boredom, because any heterosexual man who's been around an indecisive woman is bored, right? So being indecisive to me is to be actively bored, and so being indecisive in my own behavior is to bore myself. And I do it all the time. It's like, what do I want to eat? Oh, I'm instantly bored by not having an instant answer, and then I'm distracted, because when I get bored, I get really distracted, because I go through all the, and we've talked about this a lot, I go through all the self-stimming behavior that I need to not be bored anymore, and then by the time I'm not bored anymore from the self-stimming behavior, I realize that 45 minutes have passed and I haven't eaten yet, and then I get bored because I didn't think about what I wanted to eat in that time. I never came up with a solution. I never came to an answer. Am I being cromulent? I think so. It's a circle. Everything is a feedback loop. Just about everything in our brains is a feedback loop. I mean, that paper that I read to you, you can listen back to me reading it, or you can read it yourself, or whatever. That's what it says, is that everything, the way that I think specifically, the way that lonely people, but the way that I think, because I, for my purposes, and who I'm talking to, and who I'm examining, and who I'm being critical of. I'm being critical of the things that I say, for the reason that I said that you should be. I forgot what I was saying by dodging that attack. In doing that, I'm letting you see what it looks like, really. But I'm also making progress on moving these thoughts. This thought is in a lot of ways like a turd. I said that in my Sea of Stars. I think it was episode 4. I was talking about my morning bowel movement, and I asked the question of myself, what else did I want to come out of me today? And my partner thought that was funny in my video, and so I've been thinking about how I said that. And I don't know if I'm going to be one of those people who's self-referential. I'm very self-referential to begin with, but I don't... I know she tends to like content creators who are extremely self-referential to the point that they have like ongoing self-referential jokes, and their t-shirts and their merch and stuff are all self-referential, and you know, everybody likes to be on a what do they call it, an in joke, an inside joke. But I've always kind of felt like inside jokes are also exclusionary, because things aren't relative to your position. Like, it's an inside joke if you're inside the group, right? If you're in the group, you already know it's an inside joke to you. But if you're out of the group, an inside joke is just a reminder that you're not in the group. Because of what I was saying earlier, that people don't... I don't remember what I was building to with this, but people don't ask good enough questions, and they don't ask questions often enough. So they don't ask good questions, and when they do... and then what I mean to say is people don't ask enough questions. They don't ask questions often enough, and when they do bother to ask questions, they ask bad questions. And so if I'm teaching you anything, if I'm teaching you how to be a friend for this during this last 15 minutes before I spend 15 minutes wrapping up, ask questions. I said this before, but I said talk about what interests you, but ask questions. Ask questions. I said that. Ask why. But why isn't always a good question. Why is the first question, but why? I mean, we've all watched the Tiny Toons. We all remember Elvira. All right, thank you. I love you. Goodbye. Like sure, that why seems like it's just busting your balls. But why is testing whether what you're saying is wisdom, as in it's thought out, and it has a self-critical examination of itself through time, and it has authority in that, and by authority I mean it has other people who have come to the same conclusion independently of the original author. And so what I mean by having authority is the opposite of inspiration. I didn't get into an argument. I straight up called a pastor who wanted to have doctor in his name a blasphemer and antichrist for suggesting that the Bible is inspired. The Bible is in fact not inspired, and the claims of the Bible, be that the Hebrew Bible or the latter Christian Bible, any claim that those books are inspired is blasphemy of the highest order. They are absolutely not inspired. The Quran may have been inspired, but those books absolutely were not inspired. Those books, inspiration is to be inspirited. That means to have a non-you entity making choices with your body. And that is the opposite of what happened with those books. I just said something that makes my brain itch, like I just said something that I need to, that ties up what I've been saying in a really smart way that I don't understand. What did I just say? I said... What did I just say? Oh, boss fight. What a great time to pause real quick and back up, because I just said something. Oh, I can't pause. Oh, great. Okay, well, you're going to get this boss fight, and then I'll back up and try to figure out what I was thinking about. And while I'm doing this boss fight, what I'm going to do is point out how much Sea of Stars ripped this off. That Rhea and Finna, that was that their one creative choice? Was to make Rhea and Finna the two characters that are in here that just helped her to make them bad guys, or at least join up with the bad guys? Was that their creative change from Ys? Ah, shit. Because they were clearly ripping this game off, because their Brugraves and what's-her-face look just like... Come on. Look just like the Rhea and Finna, or whatever their names were. This is cool. This reminds me of Grandia 2 in a big way. Which makes me wonder, I've only played some of Ys 9 or 11, whichever one. There are 2 here on the Switch, and I've played one of them. I own both of them, but I played, well, there are 3 obviously on the Switch, Origins. But it's not a remake or one of the actual mainline Ys titles. It's a prequel. Made on... How do I heal? I thought that I had potions or whatever. This might be a fight that I'm not allowed to win. Or I'm just gonna have to get real good at this game in one fight. Oh, it hit me with that. I didn't know it was going to do damage with that. See, now I've put myself in a position where I can't really talk cromulently. I didn't mean to walk into a boss fight. I guess I should have just continued walking around at random. Because I want to talk... I guess I did. I guess I built it up enough, and I can listen back and I can take notes, because that's how I got to this. As I wrote down the words. My actual beef, the beef when I'm annoyed with liberals and I call them out and I say what they would interpret as hurtful things about their worldview, is what I'm actually railing against. My actual beef isn't with liberalism as such. It's with postmodern relativism. That's what I'm annoyed about. I think that maybe I need to avoid this boss when he's in that position entirely. Ouch. Okay, so that button doesn't do what I thought it was going to do. We're good. I'll get this. Does that block or something? What does this do? I really don't know what R2 does. It makes me walk slower. I don't know why I would want to do that. What did damage to me? Am I getting close? Is it that I'm getting close enough to it that it's just hurting me? Or... it must be. Because I did this the first time without taking damage. And now... okay, I can climb up on it while it's moved to the side, so maybe... oh god, but the perspective is a nightmare. Oh, I didn't mean to jump off. Is it supposed to be like a robot? It's like the gangly demon dickhead monster. Something like that. Oh god. Ah, shit. That didn't work exactly the way I wanted it to. I don't know why sometimes... is it because if I double tap, she'll go twice? Ah... why? It did so much damage. I guess I'm just not learning its attacks. This game's not easy. It's not like a walk in the park. Cakewalk. What do they call that? Cakewalk. And I don't know how to heal. It won't let me go into the menu to like change my equipment or whatever. Do I have to? But no, it wouldn't let me. Yeah, I don't know how to heal. I don't know what that... move out of my way? Golly gee, that didn't do what I wanted at all. Why am I like... I'm like sliding around on the ground like it's frozen. What the fuck? This is a me problem. This is a me issue. I should just... well, I can't pause. I guess I should just, like... wrap this episode up without the boss fight, but it would be so cool to wrap this episode up at a boss fight by accident with these thoughts on relativism and seeing me trying to hold on to these thoughts about relativism while doing a genuinely difficult boss fight. Because evil, the relativist argument for evil is that the evil person isn't doing an evil act to them. The argument is that the lion isn't evil among lions because it kills gazelle. But the lion is evil among the gazelle. And so evil is relative. If a lion can be a hero for killing a gazelle among lions, but the greatest kind of supervillainy to gazelles if it's a particularly good hunter, right? So like that makes good and evil relative, but that only makes, I guess what I was doing is I finished on a definition of lowercase g good. And so like if there's a lowercase g good, then that implies that there's an uppercase g good. I don't understand why. Sometimes that shoots me across the map, and sometimes it doesn't. Is it that if I double tap it, it'll shoot me across the map? Like, I don't understand why. Sometimes she bounces off of it when it does that, and sometimes she doesn't. It's almost like this is a game that was made for the PSP or something. But I am getting better every time I do it. I would love if I could heal. I have that potion. And I'm also locked at this boss. Like, I can't. That shouldn't hurt me when I'm doing that and it hits me. This game makes strange choices. Like, I don't know. Okay, so So then, what would a capital G good be? And I know that that's Plato's good, and that's Christianity's God. But I guess what I'm experiencing or what I'm not articulating is a general dissatisfaction with the term good for like a supreme deity, because like I don't know, it's lazy and hedonist. It leads to hedonism. It makes the hedonist argument, and that is hedonism is the argument that the only true good is pleasure and whatever benefits you, and thus because one of the things that ethics gets hung up on is decision making and how to quantitatively decide, how to quantify, there we go, whether a decision was the best decision. Because philosophy and philosophers are indistinguishable in personality and characteristics and character in general from a typical Reddit thread. And what I mean by that is philosophers think that they're the smartest people in any room, and on any individual Reddit thread, the people commenting for the most part are people who think that they're the smartest people on the internet. I mean, that's what Reddit is a collection of people who think they're the smartest people on the internet. Sucks. I'm doing so badly all of a sudden. And so what I mean when I say that philosophers are Redditors, what I mean is that philosophers want to quantitatively prove that they're right about what they believe, they're right about their opinions, and that they can prove them, i.e. that they are in fact God damn, the smartest people in the world, right? That's the point of philosophy. I'm not trying to prove that I'm smarter than any one particular person, but I'm not doing philosophy either. I'm on a quest for truth. I'm on a quest for truth and a quest for meaning, and I'm trying to, because I don't know that I want to support. I don't want to only prop up wisdom, because wisdom is the ancient knowing, and what I want to do is I want to do a podcast showing how quantum physics, modern quantum physics, and all of the hand waving about all these new things that are being discovered are just proofs. They're just scientific proofs of what Plato knew and what Zoroaster knew and what the Buddha knew about the other world, and how the mystical revelatory experience is quantitative and qualitative, and that there is truth in mystical revelation and divine inspiration. But that's not this, right? So, like, I'm going to find a safe point and start wrapping this toward the episode being over. So you're just going to have to deal with this image not moving for the next 15 minutes, because I want to focus on being done. Evil, initial caps evil, then becomes everything that's not good. And so when you're making the argument for what good is, well, initial caps G good isn't what's, and this is where I was getting when I said that everybody gets hung up on the how to quantitate, or how to quantize whether you've made the right choice or not, whether your choice is better than another choice, because that's what men is obsessed with. Because men's choices directly lead to their offspring, right? And I don't just mean biological offspring, but women relying on men is how men get sex. It just is what it is. Groups of people relying on individual men to make choices is how governments happen. We call it good leadership when we can quantize that the choice was the right choice, or at least a good choice, lowercase g, good choice. But you can understand when you hear me using these words, good, capital G, lowercase g, qualitatively, about their qualities. You can see why Plato got hung up for his entire life on the world of forms, and you can understand why medieval philosophy got hung up on the world of forms, and why we got hung up on the idea of perfect communication, philosophical languages, and the idea of there being one God and one approach to God that's the correct answer. And in seeing that, I can also understand, I should stop saying you, even though I know I'm talking to myself, because you, the person who is not me, listening, may not understand what I'm talking about yet. Like, comment, subscribe. I understand that the relativistic observation came from spending 1,000 years arguing the righteousness, the correctness, the truth of Christianity, and then confronting Buddhism and going, oh shit, Buddhism is exactly the same religion. Fuck. What we are is Hinduism packed for proselytization, and what that means is for export. And what I mean by packed for export is exactly what it sounds like. The religion as such, the proselytization of religion, the unification of religion, the Catholicization, that is, the universality of religion, is an economic export. It's an ethnic economic export. How do I know this? Pilgrimage, motherfucker. That's how I know this. And so when the West ran into Buddhism, which is Hinduism packed for export to the East, they went, fuck us dead. our religion is just the offspring of a much deeper religion, and then they refuse to look critically at their history. And now we're sitting here at 2023, and I can tell you advancements that have been made recently in anthropology and in linguistics that prove that Judaism isn't important enough, or isn't historically distinct enough from its Canaanite relatives to deserve a place in the UN. That Netanyahu is a criminal and a world villain, and that this whole Anti-Defamation League thing coming after Elon Musk is just exactly what the Protocols of the Priory of Zion claimed of Judaism. When you're a chosen people by the one God, you can only be illiberal when it comes to the other people. You can't be Jewish, you can't be Christian, you can't be Muslim and not be a world-conquering genocidal fuckhead. You can't not be those things. And so, like, for the the ADL, is that what they're called? The ADL, all of these, you know, I'm not... You're gonna call me anti-Jew. What's that called? Anti. See, I can't even think. Anti-Semitic. You're gonna call me anti-Semite because I said that if you actually look at history critically, and you actually look at their text critically, and you actually look at the way they have behaved as immigrants and as guests in nations that are not their own, you will see that they have been extremely impolite and disgraceful guests. That the Nazis were wrong in how they handled them, but you can absolutely come to the same conclusions that Isabella and Ferdinand came to, that these people, they're liars, they're cheaters, they're stealers, they're thieves. You can come to that conclusion when you have an entire group of people that's pretending not to be a group of people, that's pretending not to believe that they're the inheritors of the world, that they actually should own everything, and that they're the only people with the right ethic. And so relativism is how you reconcile this if you're Jewish, or if you're Christian, or if you're a post-Western Muslim, is you say, oh, well, it's all relative, and my way is the way that makes me feel good, and so religion becomes masturbation, right? But that's not what religion is. It's not relative. If the Jewish claim is correct, then every other person alive is living their life wrong and making their choices in error. So that means literally every non-Jew is a fucking idiot and doesn't deserve life, right? That's their claim. The same of Christianity. This is why the West, especially the United States, especially millennials in the United States, have abandoned Christianity, because Christianity is a claim to truth. It's a claim to one way, one algorithm for choice making, and every other choice outside that algorithm, beyond the pale of the acceptable decision making, is stupid, and stupid should be eradicated, because stupid is harmful to the self, and according to the Abrahamic faith, self-harm is illegal. Self-harm is abhorrent to God. You're not allowed to kill yourself. You're not allowed to cut yourself out of the fabric of time, so that means you're also not allowed to make choices about the fabric of time. There are select individuals chosen by the deity to make those decisions, and in the Abrahamic faith, they have names like Rabbi, Pope, and Imam. These are the people who are allowed to make choices, and not because, in fact, of the tradition. The tradition is why you don't question why they're allowed to make the choices. In fact, the reason that they're allowed to make choices is because of wisdom. Because 2,500 years ago, we figured out that there was only one class of people that were qualified to make choices, and it was the people who could and had the time to look at human history critically, their own selves critically, their own community critically, and the what we would call the Akashic record, the vast storage of human knowledge and memory that we have available to us in folklore and scripture, song and poetry. And being able to accurately, that is correctly, that is interpret them in the only way. There's only one way to correctly interpret wisdom. And so the reason that there are certain people that are set aside is because these certain people are set aside by wisdom traditions, which teach them, according to the tradition, how the wisdom is interpreted so that it can be then taught back to the community in the way that I'm doing to you. We, in the West, with the advent of relativism and political and religious liberalism, cut that wisdom tie. And we said wisdom is tradition, they are the same thing, and we should cut them because they only made bad choices. This is what I was talking about with millennial rejectionism. Rejectionism as such is saying that the past only made bad choices and there's nothing to be learned from it. That we are the first and only generation to be awake, and as such we are the first and only generation to have true wisdom, to have true gnosis. And that's the implication that 13 Sentinels wants to end on. That it's possible to create a group of people who have true gnosis, who have true wisdom, who can make true choices as leaders. But the way that the storytellers of 13 Sentinels chose to explore that reality required species genocide. It required human extinction. Because whether the writers of that game know it or not, the writers of that game have picked up something from wisdom that people think is tradition, and that's that the end is coming. The end is nigh. Civilizations that last more than 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, civilizations, societies that can do that, they do that because of a constant churn at the top and in the middle. Constant churn in leadership and power. But the identity remains the same. The goal remains the same. The meaning of the theme remains the same. Because every people has an author. Whether they know it or not, every people has a creator and every people has an author. Every people has a god at different levels of both levels of abstraction. That is, the level of abstraction, which is Rashan, the DM insert character that acts on the world. So your priests and your god kings like Netanyahu. And you also have the god who acts on the world as the inspiration of the author. And we have to be careful about our inspirations. We need to be seriously and significantly more careful about what and who we allowed to inspire us in a very real way. Because inspiration is inspiriting. It means that you are allowing yourself, your choice, the you who is the pilot of the mechanistic body which creates a three-dimensional virtual reality for you to play in and experience an outside reality, which is the case. You are not your body. You aren't even analogous to your body. So all of this body image culture, all of this fashion culture, none of that is you. It's not even representative of you. The idea that your clothing and the way that you do your hair are representative of you, it's to say it's facile, to say it's shallow is the most dramatic understatement. It's literally not even skin deep. It's literally not even skin deep. This is why body mod is so popular. Well, a tattoo is deeper than my clothing, and it's more permanent, so it's got to be me, right? It has to be representative of me, right? But just look at our tattoos. Any of the R tattoo, any of the Reddit tattoo threads. It's just shitty tattoo after shitty tattoo after shitty tattoo, and people saying, is this a good tattoo? For attention. They got the attention because they wanted some sort of positive reinforcement for it. Like I talked about, they wanted somebody to see them as like them. And that's the end, and this one is especially meandering and wild, because I did what I said I was probably never going to try to do, and I played a narrative game, because I thought that it would be less, I thought that I would be more likely to not die doing that than playing something like Brotato. And I've come to the end of the amount of time that I want to spend on this, and I know I haven't come to the end of what I wanted to say, because I haven't even defined evil yet. And I really haven't talked about what it means to do the best good for the most amount of people. I haven't really talked about what I wanted to talk about. I gave myself lots of hooks. And, you know, working through the distraction, the confusion, the pain, the disappointment. That was the goal. Vindicate myself. What I feel vindicated on, and what you should take away with from this if you want secret knowledge, is that philosophy is a dead end. Philosophy is a dead end. Philosophy as it exists, and most certainly as it was performed in the 20th and 19th centuries, it's a dead end. The woke worldview, modern liberalism, they're dead ends. Conservatism only works, and it only exists because they have a tradition of critical self-analysis. And only in some places. And I can only say that that's true. I can't say it's true in England. I can only say it's true in the United States, because I don't think that conservative traditions do rely on wisdom across the world. I think that across the world, I think that in Europe, the conservative tradition is accurately portrayed when people portray American conservatives, and they say that they don't care about the poor, and there's no compassion, and all that they want is unfettered economic liberty. But that hasn't been the case for American Republicans since George H.W. Bush. Since before H.W. Bush. The reason that we will remember W. Bush's presidency well 50 years from now, and why we're starting to remember it well now, is because that's when the Republicans realized that the way things had been being done couldn't work anymore. You know, Obama did a lot of good for this country, but none of it is the good that anyone would point to. What Obama did well was he made the Republicans self-critical. He forced them to be self-critical. And the reason he forced them to be self-critical is because the conservative response to losing is to just dig your heels in. That's why North Carolinians are called Tar Heels. You dig your heels in and you fight to the death. But our conservatives figured out sometime around the time they saw the Koch brothers make the AstroTurf and Tea Party movements work. American conservatives all across the country, whether they be this, is her name Lauren Boebert? She's got the worst name, because I still remember, what was her name? Lorena Boebert, wasn't it? The woman who cut off dude's dick? Her name is too close to the castrating lady, but I think she leans into that. And the whole smoking weed thing is actually funny to me. It actually makes me like the conservatives more, that they've leaned into weed and having sex scandals and apologizing for them, and then actually changing their behavior and figuring out that this stuff isn't okay, that behaving like a liberal isn't okay. Because relativism says if you can get away with it, do it. If no one's going to give you negative feedback for it, do it. And I guess, as I'm ending, what I'm thinking about is that can't be right, because I've lived my whole life and I've assumed that because nobody has given me negative feedback for the way that I am, constructive feedback for the way that I am, I've never really had legitimate consequences that are actually meaningful and actually my fault for my behavior, that my behavior is in some way acceptable. But if you've been listening to this podcast, I've been confronted recently with the facts that most of my behavior isn't acceptable. And the reason that we don't criticize one another, i.e. the reason that nobody criticized me, is that we're not friends anymore. We're not a community anymore. We can't criticize one another anymore. You criticize the wrong person, they're going to shove a gun in your face. Just for telling them, like, hey, your shoe's untied. Because this is the world that we live in. Because we allowed Hollywood and liberals and libertarians to mythologize the West, and to mythologize the colonization of this country and this landmass as heroic genocide. But they weren't heroic genocides. Genocides happened. But they don't have to be heroic if you understand that by heroic I mean imitable. And by imitable I mean something that you should imitate in your own life, that you should represent in your own way of being. And I could keep talking on this for 2 hours, because I know that I still have thoughts, but I've gotten to the ramble stage. So, here's your takeaway. Be more present, not just in your life, but in the lives of the people around you. Pay attention, be aware, ask questions, ask good questions, ask hard questions. My dad, when I was a little boy, he told me that there is such a thing as a stupid question. Teachers will tell you that there's no such thing as a stupid question. Stupid girls will tell you that there's no such thing as a stupid question. But there is such thing as a stupid question. And I'm here to tell you now that there is such a thing as a stupid question, and we ask them all the time. A stupid question is easy to define, and it's easy to identify. It's any question that you ask out loud that you could answer for yourself. So ask better questions. Ask questions that you can't figure out the answers to. The only way we're going to know, the only way we're ever going to identify whether Jordan Peterson is in fact divinely inspired, the only way we're going to know if Center Place, and I love Center Place, is on to anything. The only way we are going to know whether the people who stand out in front of us and speak are demagogues, are in fact leaders, the only way we're going to know is to ask them difficult questions. And when they don't give us satisfactory answers, to tell them that they're not giving us satisfactory answers. The reason that Christianity has died in the West is because when good people, well-intentioned, good-thinking, well-thinking people asked questions, the church, Christianity, said that they didn't have to give answers. That because God is defined as that which is the answer behind all questions, the church didn't have to answer your questions. If you needed the answer, God would present the answer in your life in a way that you could understand it. And we said, no. That's emotional manipulation. No, we're not about that. We're not about that. And then we didn't fix it. We just emulated it. We said, well, if it was good enough for the church, it'll work for us. And so liberals and postmoderns and relativists call religion and spirituality mysticism. They call it mind control. Marxists call it opiates, call it an opiate for the masses. But what are they? They don't have answers either. In fact, their answers are lies, like global warming, like the energy crises around the world, like global hunger, like slavery. They're just lies. The economy. All the answers that the postmodernists and the relativists and the liberals give us, they're lies. And the answers that the conservatives give us, they're not answers. They're just emotional vindication. And I said it before, what's emotional vindication with no action behind it? You're just Simone de Beauvoir telling a whole group of people that they're bad for being what they are. And that you're superior for being what you claim of yourself while offering no proofs. So whatever. This one's running long. 2.5 hours. It's sat on a blank screen for 30 or 40 minutes now. I should have just kept playing. So thank you for listening this long. Thank you. And from the bottom of my heart, in a very, very deep place, thank you for sticking around with me. If this is your first, thank you for sticking around with me. If this is a return visit for you, thank you for making it this far. Let me know how you're doing. I hope you're doing alright. I'll talk to you again soon.